والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وآله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. So in Surah Ohad, what we find is that in Surah Al Imran, what we find is that when the Muslims went out to the plains of Ohad to receive the oncoming Meccan army, they were filled with confidence that because they have embraced Islam, that they could never lose. They had become complacent. Now, the state there was that they were not really committed to the spiritual message of the Blessed Prophet. Their understanding was more so, well, many of theirs, that if we believe in God, then we are assured victory. And maybe that made them somewhat arrogant from within. Now they lost the battle. One of the verses that the Quran has in this respect is that these are days that we revolve with people. Sometimes you have victory, sometimes others have victory. Victory and defeat is not the same as success and failure. The Quran was trying to point this out, that success and failure is to do with the inner being, not with the body or with persuasion or with mind or with belonging to any order. So if you have lost, but if the inner being is refined, having full confidence in God, that in loss there must be some wisdom that you have, O Lord, and I wholeheartedly embrace it, then that physical defeat constitutes inner success because it refines the soul, makes it more reliant on God and selfless, and makes it reliant, selfless, and makes it less egoistic. On the other hand, with the defeat in the battle, if a person's heart feels, well, where is God? What happened to God? We believed in him, he's abandoned us. And some of the verses convey this sentiment. They say, oh Muhammad, whatever good there is, it is from Allah. Whatever evil there is, it's from you. Because they did not want to blame God for their defeat. So God responds, say both are from God. Good and victory and defeat are both from God, or good and evil, the way you are describing it, are both from God. In later verses, the Quran says, whatever of good you have is from Allah, whatever evil you have is from yourselves. Now, what the Quran was trying to say was that all these conditions, situations are created by God. And the intention of God is only good. And if you were to grow through these apparent calamities and defeats, then you need to see that as good from God. But if through the victories of this world and the defeats of this world, your hearts are turned away from God, then that is an evil that you have imposed upon your soul by interacting with that situation in less than a befitting way. With that prelude in mind now, let us go further into the psychology of the Sahaba. So they were complacent at times, a lot of them. When they lost at Ohad, the reason was that they were far more interested in the spoils of war. And the Quran says that the Prophet told you not to abandon your posts, but your greed drove you to worldly gain. Hence, you suffered the defeat. The Quran further explains, but at Badr, when your brethren were being killed, and you learned that they had received the lofty ranks in paradise, you too stated despairingly, if only I had been with them. Well, then, I gave you this chance to get martyrdom, yet you fled from it. The Quran is trying to awaken the soul that look, there is something else that needs to be acknowledged. Your inner being. There is something else going on in there. There is incongruence between what you are saying and thinking and what you are feeling and how you have committed internally. So when the Muslims had that apparent defeat at Uhud, we read in exegesis and of course certain historical texts that a group of Muslims ran towards the Meccans and they said to Abu Sufyan, spare us our lives and we are ready to come back into the worship of the idols Hubal, Lat, Manat and Uzza. Now, the Quran at this point then talks to this community. And it says, well, Allah wanted to clarify what was inside you. He wanted to separate the dirt and the filth from that which is pure. What we understand by all of this event and the verses that were coming in is that as human beings, we are extremely hidden to ourselves. And at times, we convince ourselves of what we are not, and we pretentiously uphold that personality. But when we become convinced, it's not even pretentious in the sense that we're not consciously doing it. And the trials of this world are geared in a way to awaken us to ourselves. Now, how do we implement that moral and that sentiment carried within this particular surah and that is displayed in the Battle of Uhud? You see, our spontaneous reactions to situations tell us a lot about the way we are inside, internally. That then gives us a unique access into what is going in there. With that comes an opportunity to acknowledge ourselves accurately and to remedy ourselves. The people in the Battle of Uhud, subsequently, they acknowledged the weakness of their faith and the inappropriate way in which they had set their priorities by coming into Islam, winning of battles, gaining of the war, plunder, so on and so forth. And they repented and they reformed themselves. And hence it is said that one defeat was better than many victories. So in our case, when we spontaneously react to a situation, after that reaction, what we need to do is to stop, pause, as opposed to letting it go through force of habit, to actually pause and to examine that reaction. Not to become oblivious to it, nor to justify it, but to examine it. Now, on many occasions, we find that we ask somebody for something and they refuse. And we know that their refusal is unjust. And we also know that that person now will be forced to justify themselves or live with this guilt and suffer internally. We need to ask ourselves, well, what prompted me to ask this question of this person and put them in such a compromised state in the first place? Could I not have chosen a wiser behavior? Was my motivation a sincere motivation? Did I do it recklessly? Was I hasty? Could I not have thought through the situation before posing that question, because I knew that person will more than likely refuse, was my intention to show them up and to make them feel bad about themselves. This introspection will then say, no, next time round, I need to behave with wisdom. I have this tendency in me to behave recklessly, or I have this tendency in me which is less than befitting of exposing people and making them feel bad about themselves. Similarly, when we are faced with a situation, how do we respond? On many occasions, we find that when people are talking ill of others and for entertainment purposes, we too join in. We need to, at that point, instead of then letting it go or justifying it, we need to ask, what was the need for that? Is there a need inside there, a petty need to entertain people at the expense of the good name of others or mockery at others? Am I that low that I need to do this? And if I am, then I seek forgiveness. And next time round, I will not do such a thing. When somebody does something that is annoying and we get angry, we need to pause and introspect and see that no, that inner capacity is lacking. There should be such broadness of the chest that people can say anything and it would not perturb me. On occasions, and I used to often encounter this, that people would offend me and that hurt would not leave my heart for hours, sometimes for days. Instead of justifying it, instead of feeling this offense and hurt, to look inside and say, well, why am I so offended? Let it go. Why am I so weak? Let it go. This is the true nature of my being. In instances, we display greed, we display jealousy, we display lack of trust in God, we display lack of compassion towards others. All these instances are created by God for us to spontaneously react to them. But then God expects us to turn them into opportunities by pausing, looking inwards, examining the self, and begin to rectify ourselves. What this does is it makes us into fuller creatures, godly humans. Now you will have seen either ourselves, we will see either ourselves or those around us, that 20 years ago, reaction to a particular event was X, Y, and Z. 20 years on, reaction to the same event is the same. So here we can say that 20 years have elapsed, but there has been no growth process. And that is a real wastage of 20 years. 20 years ago, I was fearful for my sustenance of tomorrow. 20 years have gone. I've lived for the last 20 years. On this night, I am fearful of not receiving my sustenance of tomorrow. What have I learned in the last 20 years? I was distrusting of God 20 years ago. He's looked after me for the past 20 years, and I'm still distrusting of God. 20 years ago, I could not forgive. Today, I'm unable to forgive. For example, 20 years ago, I could not tolerate a contrary opinion. Today, I can't tolerate contrary opinion. What that means is that 20 years have elapsed and the inner being hasn't grown. And God is constantly supplying us with events that come as opportunities, or opportunities that come as life events, for us to pause and to introspect. Look at ourselves. very accurately, collect ourselves and say, right, I'm going to begin this. Now, what happens is that often we go through this exercise, but we make the same mistake again. Now, here is where we can feel very defeated. But no, don't be defeated. It's happened once, it's happened twice, it's happened the third time. Don't give up. The fourth time, we will catch it in time. We might interact slightly. The fifth time, we will start beginning to acquire the art of not responding and not reacting to a situation inappropriately, and we begin to deepen ourselves and become more wholesome creatures from within. I have at least noticed this in my own life, that the spontaneous reactions have revealed to me about myself to a great extent. Now, what happens there is that, of course, when you practice it enough times over many years, your spontaneous reactions are taught out, unless it's the same situation in which it's a wholesome spontaneous reaction because you've already modified it. But otherwise, your immediate reaction is actually taught out within that instance. So, for example, when somebody goes past you and you feel it's not your fault, and he shows you two fingers and screams at you, so now you just smile and you know that, okay, you can just knock him off the road, or you can swear back, or you can curse. You will just smile and go back and say, brother, I didn't do that. I think it was your fault, Instead of swearing and cursing, just smile it off and not get enraged. The spontaneous reaction previously, putting the hand on the horn and horning away and swearing and gesturing all types of obscene gestures and dangerously driving next to the, well, I'll tell you what it was, the motorbike, yeah. But I didn't do anything. And I think that man realized that, okay, yeah, it was his fault, not my fault. In any case, that's fine. But as we progress in life, we become calmer, and our spontaneous reactions become reactions that are taking place, even though they're very speedy, but they're taking place with a lot of wisdom behind them. So I'll stop there. And of course, the application of this is broad and everyday application. So, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Shaykh. Shaykh, there is a message before Samina, I get to you. How does a mother accept the death of her child? What and how can she deal with this trauma, the absence of her child who she will not see?
It is the most difficult part of life to lose a child, especially when a mother loses a child. There are a few things that can help in this respect. Allah says in the Quran, and when the flute is blown into, there shall be no familial relations on that day. And everybody shall come for their accountability individually. And after that, people will be joined with their worldly family as children and spouses and brothers and sisters. But what we can understand from this is that before coming to this life, we individually, I feel, have met each other and have arranged to be in a certain way with each other, mother-child relationship. And I do feel that aside from the fixed times of death that might have been stipulated for certain people, for the majority of humanity, death can be altered. The time of death can be altered. So to think of it in this way, that we met, we decided that we will have this relationship in this world, we will grow through each other, and one will leave the other to let them experience the joy of love of having a child, and then let them experience the pain of losing a child. and to gain the fullness of their own self and their light through that pain and that experience. Then to remind themselves, well, it is not a question of you will never see the child. It's a question of we will never see that person again in their bodily features. But the truth of that person has never gone away. The essence of that being was with me prior to arrival into this world, is with me within this world, and shall be with me when my body gives up in this world. So to not to think of the bodily demise as the death of the person never dies. They are alive, they are well, they are with us. The only thing is that there's a thin veil between the bodily world and the real world from which we are. And the only reason that veil becomes extremely forceful is because in our minds we have given death the rank of separation, and therefore we reinforce that veil. It's not supposed to be as overpowering and strong as we've made it. Allow ourselves to feel those who have gone. We will feel their presence, and they have not gone away at all. But obviously, it's our human condition that we want to see them in our dreams. But seeing in a dream is a lesser meeting. Meeting through the heart and by feeling the presence is the only meeting. In this world, two bodies can be together, but the hearts may not meet ever. You can have a husband and wife being together, accompanying each other through bodies for 40, 50, 60 years, but they have never met. The bodies become a veil. The real meeting is not of the body or in the dream world. The real meeting is here. Allow yourself to feel that beautiful child has not gone away. The child is here, waiting your reception and waiting for you, waiting to receive you in the fullest sense after your bodily journey ends.
Thank you, Shaykh. That was really beautifully said. Samina, I'm just going to ask you to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Yeah. Salam, Shaykh. How are you?
Alaikum salam.
Okay. Shaykh, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned two things, that jealousy and greed are bestowed upon us by God. How can God make, jealousy and greed purposely for a person? That was one question. The other one was the no growth process, where you said 20 years ago, like, I have the same reaction as I have today. Why does that happen? Like 20 years ago, I reacted to a situation and I again react to that same situation exactly the same way. So what are these two things? I know they're different questions.
So God does not give us greed. God
Right.
exposes that jealousy and greed.
Exposes, okay.
So sometimes we don't know we have that. So Iblis was extremely jealous and egoistic. Adam was extremely insecure and desirous for more. So God created that situation of Iblis having to prostrate to Adam, where to Iblis, his arrogance and his jealousy was revealed. Iblis was supposed to look inwards and say to Allah, thank you, and now rectify this situation for me. Instead, Iblis arrogantly says to God, it's your fault. Adam was extremely insecure and distrusting of God. So he wanted to eat the fruit of life to become ever living. He recognizes this weakness and he turns to God and he states, oh Allah, forgive me. I've oppressed my soul. To imply that I was distrusting of you and I forgot. I should have been mindful. So God creates those opportunities for us to unveil ourselves. Now, greed, jealousy, lust, these are not evils. No, these are potentials that we are supposed to harness and cultivate. I want to talk about it at some point, that all these things inside us that we consider as evil are not to be seen as evil, rather they are to be seen as potentials.
Like learning processes?
Yeah, so imagine if a person is greedy, the amount of potential they have to become charitable.
Mm.
If a person is generally charitable and they don't feel that struggle within, then that opportunity of refining their souls by overcoming their greed is not there.
Mm.
If a person is angry and they have to learn how to control their anger and how to channel that energy into kindness and mercy, it's like taming a stallion, that if it's tamed, it becomes a heavenly steed. So at some point, we want to talk about that as well, that they're not supposed to be seen as evil.
Right.
In the rightest sense, they're supposed to be seen as opportunities.
Opportunities. Okay. And the other thing, when we don't, like 20 years ago, you said we have the same reaction as today. And does that mean we haven't grown?
Yeah, exactly. It means that we haven't progressed, unfortunately.
Right.
So
And
those
so
things
how
that
does
are, so well, we after 20 years, if we react in the same way, then obviously it's an awakener for us that wake up now, 20 years have gone, you may not have many more left. So address this situation now, address this problem now.
Right. Okay, fine. Thank you, Shaykh. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
If there are any more questions, I don't see any. Thank you so much, Shaykh, for this lovely talk.